In the late 18th century, western Pennsylvania was the frontier, protected by militia and rangers. This weekend is the annual Revolutionary War Days at Fort Roberdeau, near Altoona, Pennsylvania. During the American Revolution, lead was an important resource for ammunition for the conflict. The British blockade of colonial ports made it nearly impossible to import lead from Europe. So when an unusual lead deposit was found in Sinking Valley, Pennsylvania, it became a valuable resource to develop. General Daniel Roberdeau organized an expedition to begin exploiting the ore-rich valley. Fort Roberdeau was built to protect the mining and smelting operation from Native American and Tory raiders. The fort was only garrisoned from 1778 to 1780, and while no shots were ever fired in defense of the fort, it still protected crucial combat materials until France joined the war, allowing the import of European lead and shot.
Oh no, the Indians had faces could tell you. The Indians had theirs is gone.
If you're one of the 93% not subscribed, click that subscribe button and join the community.
Yeah, the rifle wasn't, I think the biggest misconception about this time in the 18th century, everyone tends to think Daniel Boone and the long rifle. That really doesn't peak in terms of the perfection of the American long rifle or the Kentucky long rifle or the Pennsylvania long rifle until the 1790s. And to have one made at this time period is extremely cost prohibitive. So, again, stereotype and romance tend to cloud the historical picture in terms of truth. But you did have, oddly enough, you did have what were called smooth-bore rifles, or what the French would call a fusil. It basically was a rifle without the rifling in the barrel. But the ball itself still had to be seated into a patch and pushed down. So they did have that, but your rifles were still kind of in flux in terms of the perfections that would eventually show up in the Pennsylvania long rifle, which was then later renamed the Kentucky long rifle, and so on and so on and so on. So this was it, you know. Beyond 75 yards, it really has no...
It still has
range.
stopping power, but...
It has stopping power, but only in the sense that the saying, get the lead out. Under 75 yards, you have a chance of more or less trying to aim, more or less. But as a military weapon, it makes more sense to line men up 10 deep, so to speak, one row in front, one row in back, and just volley fire.
Like a giant shotgun.
Like a giant, yeah, that's literally what you're looking at.
Plus they're quicker to load.
They're quicker to load. The rifleman, by the time he got done preparing a rifle, which they did have riflemen that were sharpshooters, don't get me wrong, they did use the rifle in a limited capacity. But by the time a rifleman would have loaded and fired, a good musket man could get off 3 shots. So it was a 1-to-3 ratio, more or less. So.
And then the other benefit, riflemen couldn't do this.
Yep, attached bayonet.
And let me show you.
See how much more he's extended in terms of a weapon. I'm not going to walk toward it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I'm going to turn and go the other way.
Exactly.
If I start walking towards you guys, what would your instinct be?
Step out of the way.
Turning around, yeah.
That's what the
Reenactors from all around the region are spending the weekend living 18th century life. The magazine here in the fort has been rebuilt and is now open for tours. The structure stored powder and shot for the fort, and you can see the inventory here of the arms that were at the fort in 1780.
discovered there was lead in the ground in the area here around the fort. And what's odd is lead just doesn't occur in Pennsylvania. But what I have here is a nice example of galena or lead ore. And if you see the gray, that's here in this stone, that is lead. And as a metal, as an element, lead melts at 600 degrees. Every metal has a melting point. So if I get a nice hot fire going here and I put this stone on the fire, when it gets to be 600 degrees, the lead will actually melt out of that ore. And I have to let the fire cool and go out, and then I'll stir through the ashes of my fire, and I'll have globs of lead like this in the ashes of my fire. I put the ladle on the fire, the lead gets to be 600 degrees, it melts. At that point, I have a brass dipper, and I will dip that liquid lead and pour it into the hole here of my ball mold.
Does he not do that no more?
And when it cools,
Do that no more?
I have a lead ball. But more importantly, I've got a musket ball. So, I have a little gunpowder here in my powder horn. I'll pour a little gunpowder down the barrel. Take my musket ball, I put it down the barrel. Take my ramrod, and I push the ball down the barrel. And my musket's loaded, and I'm ready to defend our fort if we were under attack.
Now, I want you to fall back on, well, I'll say B movies. Which one, the middle, my right, well, yeah, my right, or my left, which would be the opposite for you. Which one, who wants to be brave and point to the tomahawk? Which one? This one? My God, he's right. The true tomahawk. The true tomahawk actually refers to a war club. It does not refer to an axe. It comes from tomahawkin, which is Powhatan word for club.
The muskets. Of course, before the American Revolution, there were 13 colonies. And they worked with the British military, especially in the French and Indian War, which preceded the Revolution by 20 years. So in the early part of the war, they're going to be using some British muskets. They're going to be making muskets here in America that are based on that British pattern, which we today call the Brown Bess. We don't know if that term was used in the 18th century. They were either the long or the short land pattern musket. When France got into the war, at first secretly shipping weapons to us, and then later as our allies, they adopted the French muskets, which are today known as the Charleville, and that's what our militia soldier is armed with, a Charleville. Are you ready to try again? All right. The way you tell the difference, the British Brown Bess musket, the stock is pinned to the barrel. With the French Charleville, there are iron bands. There, you can see the difference. There are iron bands that hold the barrel to the stock. Okay, let's try it again. There we go. Very good. Actually, when you're training a soldier, you're going to train him by going step by the numbers. But on the battlefield, they're not going to do that. They're just going to give the command prime and load. So we'll do that, and we'll see how fast these gentlemen can load and get a shot off. Prime and load! No need to ram. That was about 12 seconds. There you go. So it's a pretty good rate of fire. And the whole key to this, especially in open country, is speed. You would fire several volleys at the enemy. And there would be casualties inflicted. And when you began to see an enemy starting to flinch, starting to lose their formation, You're then going to close in with the bayonet. Shoulder your arms. Charge your bayonets. Audrey! So, you see 1,000 guys coming at you with these 6-foot spears. What are you going to do? You're going to run. Now we're going to finish up with a big bang. And that is our artillery piece. Artillery was very rare on the frontier. It says something for Daniel Roberdeau's political influence at the time that he was able to get 4 double fortified 4-pounder cannon all the way out here in the middle of nowhere to defend his fort. Now the way this works is you are going to first make sure it's safe to load the gun. So you're going to stop up the vent hole. There's a little hole at the breech. You're going to stop that up with your thumb. You're going to put a wormer or a wad hook down the barrel, which we've already done this part, so we're not going to show it. Once you've determined that there are no sparks lingering on the bottom at the breech of that gun, because you don't want to load a bag of powder on top of a burning ember. That would keep you from playing the piano for the rest of your life. You're going to run up the charge, load it, and then ram it down. It works just like a musket, but much larger. And here we go.
Make ready.
Fire!
That's your milk.
As we said, there was never any combat actually at Fort Roberdeau. But what would a get-together of reenactors be without a little bit of a what-if battle scenario?
Now, why would you leave a perfectly good fort?
No idea.
Well, the reason you do is you have to determine if this is just a couple of stray raiders or if this is a serious attack. So the Americans are coming out to try to probe and see how many of these warriors and loyalists are out there.
10 paces while you're loading. Advance 10 paces. You are answer.
But I assure you, sir, we shall return.
I'm sure you will.
Get up!
No!
Get up! Get up! Get up! Let's go! Let's go!
Don't hit the women.
Make ready! Fire!
There we go. That'll make the rabbits run.
Hey, thanks for coming along for this look at life and activity here at Fort Roberdeau, the lead mine fort. We appreciate you watching, and like always, till next time, have a great week.
Shoulder arms. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be firing the cannon. If you do not like loud noises, please hold your ears now.